It's Don here from the board. Thanks for coming along and checking out this video. Today's video is really kind of a part 2 of sorts, where I'm going to be having a look and talk over my 96 key kit that I built from Taobao. Now, I had bought this last year around October. I didn't really get around to doing anything with it for a really long time. I had a bunch of switches. Originally I was going to put box whites into it, and in the end I finally built it on July 22nd on a live stream, and I put in box navies. At the time, if you haven't actually watched that video, it is in the playlist of course, but obviously it's a live stream where I've built the entire keyboard. I ran into some interesting hiccups with the design of this particular PCB. And this keyboard, which I've brought back from work because I've been using this as my daily driver at work, the numpad had some really odd design choices where the plus and the enter on the numpad, the switch positions were incorrect. So they were rotated 90 degrees and they didn't actually line up the plate to the PCB holes. I don't know exactly what happened there in their design phase or who their PCB designer was. Perhaps they copied, just switch positions and they didn't know what they were doing or how it was meant to be put together. Either way, it didn't work natively. Thanks to the people in the actual live stream who were watching, we cobbled together a MacGyver type of solution, which was to put a diode leg through the PCB and have the pins on the switch bent, and then just wick solder down to it to make that connection, and it worked. It's not a beautiful fix, it's not a super clean fix, but it works. Functionally, we tested it with the Eco switch heater, and the switches actuated as they were supposed to. Now, the end result was that I put keycaps on this and I took it to work, and I've been using it every single day at work when I'm at work as my daily driver, and I've been doing that for an entire month. And I just wanted to sort of lay down some of my thoughts on what using this keyboard's like, and then of course talk about some of the issues that I've discovered with using this keyboard. So of course, to give you a better idea of what I'm talking about, let me switch over to my tabletop now. There it is. So this is the 96 switch keyboard that I'm talking about here. This is what I believe is commonly also sometimes called an 1800 kind of layout. It's numpad over here. We've got a function row across the top. I've got some arrow keys. There's a very short shift, and there's also a function layer. Now this runs off boot mapper, and it also has lighting and RGB in it as well. First of all, having navies in it, it's loud. Like, I can click and type on this and it's quite loud. The steel plate is fantastic. There is practically really no flex. Like you can see I'm pushing on this and the whole table is wobbling, and I really love that. At work I have an actual mat, a tech mat, so it does kind of dampen the sound a little bit, but it's a really great typing experience. Of course, ignoring the fact that I'm using the old style navies where it could be cracking stems, when I've had to take some of these keycaps off because I found some DSA novelties from Royal Navy that I've put in here, they haven't actually had cracked keycaps. But that's a separate issue. But what I've kind of discovered is that these rotated switches over here, now if I hold it up to the camera, I don't know if you'll be able to, if it'll focus onto that. So there we go. So see that little leg sticking up, that silver bit? If I gently sort of turn that, you can see I've got a bent switch pin. And it's because that's how it had to be MacGyvered. It doesn't always cleanly actuate. So what I mean by that is if I actually hit this switch in the middle, it doesn't always register a hit. I actually have to hit it on the top for it to register a hit. And I think that's just because that join between the diode leg and the bent leg of the pin is probably not perfect. So it's probably got a little bit of a cold joint issue there, but it still does work. I just have to remember not to hit in the middle, but on the top. However, the plus key seems to be perfectly fine. So there's no issues there. On a functionality aspect, because prior to using this 96 key, I'd been using a split clone, the Taobao clone of the VEA, I was making a little bit of mistakes when I readjusted back to using a normal layout keyboard and not a split keyboard. That was fine, but having the arrow keys here was a little bit of a challenge, as it's not so much navigating the arrow keys, but I'm used to using a full-size numpad, and you'll see on a numpad you've got the 2U for the 0, and I end up hitting a lot of the time the right key instead of the 0. Quite often, even if I do that, I'll hit both, and it means if I'm in Excel, it'll navigate me one cell over and dump the 0 there, or if I'm in a text box, instead of getting a 0, I'll end up with a movement in that text box, or nothing, because obviously if my cursor's already at the end of the row, it's not going to go anywhere. So there's some of the things that I've had to overcome a little bit. With it being programmable in Bootmapper, you can see up here I've put home and end, delete, page up, page down, and then print screen, because I use print screen for capping, you know, things, screen caps and stuff like that. Page up, page down is quite nice being there. Home and end is okay, but I'm still not 100% sure about having delete there. At one point, I thought about moving delete all the way to the end so that if I was trying to backspace, I would just always go to that end point, because I was discovering that I was accidentally hitting end as well as page up just with hand movements, right? So that's just a little bit of the compact problems that you have if you're used to a much bigger sort of layout. Overall, having used it for practically a month now, it's going to be a month and a couple of days in terms of calendar days, I quite like this compact layout. The only bugbear I have really is this numpad issue, the delete issue. I can deal with, I can move that, but I can't really move these arrow keys because the spacing here doesn't really help that. If I could shift this over a little bit, because I don't really use that shift in a normal capacity, and the function keys, well, I could move them over as well, then I could still have my 2U. But of course, the plate doesn't support that. The plate doesn't support that in the way that the switches are cut, so I would have to use a 2U keycap, and then of course it would be double the actuation force rather than a single key and stabilized. So they're just some of the things that I had in adjusting to using a 96 key layout. In terms of the build, this is where the bulk of what I'm moving forward to now is. It's okay. Like, the keyboard's nice and heavy, it doesn't slide around or anything like that. There is some sharp bits of the actual case, and you can see I've actually put tape on that because the metal it's got burrs that are poking through, and I kind of nearly sliced myself moving the keyboard one morning, so I put that tape there. And on this side it's not too bad, there's no issues there. But here's the fun part on using an RGB keyboard that I hadn't really had a problem with prior to this, is their power draw issues. I use a 4-port hub at work. It drives my Bluetooth mouse, it drives a macro pad as well as my big switch lock button, and I'd plug this into it. And it kept coming up with errors, and I didn't know what was going on, and it wasn't actually recognizing the keyboard properly. After unplugging some things and plugging it in and resetting things and trying to figure out what was going on, I realized that the RGB lighting on this keyboard was actually pulling probably more power than what the hub was able to support across all the devices. Because when I unjacked everything else, it was fine. So in the end, what I've ended up having to do is I've had to plug this completely separately out of my 4-port hub into my docking port for my computer at work to actually make it run. And this is where it leads to the second issue in buying a cheap kit from Taobao. So if you were watching my stream when I built this and I plugged it in, it was bright. It lit up and it was very, very nifty. And all LEDs on the bottom lit up. So what you're seeing now is 3 LEDs. 3 RGB LEDs lighting up because the others have stopped working. Yeah. Good stuff, right? Now, they didn't all immediately die. And I didn't even realize that they were dying until the second half of them actually died. So there's one row that runs across the top here, and there's another row that runs across the bottom. And if I flip this over, so it's in sort of its usual formation, as it were, like this, you can see that there's definitely light that's coming off down here in this bottom corner, right? My desk pad at work is black, so it doesn't reflect light like this. So on the front side, I'm actually seeing the light come out there, and on the back side, you know, there's a bit of bleed, and it's not super duper bright. But I'd say about a week in was when I came back to my desk, and I was looking at the keyboard side on, when I realized that there was no LED happening in the back corner. And I thought, oh, that's a bit weird. I wonder if it's a lighting mode thing. So I picked it up and I flipped it over, and the entire back row was off. It wasn't working at all. But the front row was working. So I thought, oh, that's a bit weird. I unplugged it. I plugged it back in. Still nothing. I unplugged it. I plugged it back in. And once again, still the back row didn't work. So I thought, wow, okay, did all of those RGB LEDs die? Well, you know, I wasn't too fast because LED isn't a big deal for me. RGB is not a big deal for me. And I thought, well, it's just cheap. But the front row was still glowing, so that was okay. And then about another week after that, somebody who hadn't come around to my desk for a while came around and they saw my keyboard and they were like, oh, wow, that's really cool. You've got RGB going on underneath. And I was like, yeah. And that's when I picked it up and I flipped it over to show them, and they went, what happened to the other side? I hadn't even realized for up to a week that the other 4 RGB LEDs here, the other 5, weren't even working. And it was because I could only see this corner when I approached my desk, coming into my desk, and they were working and on. So for the last 2 weeks, it's only been these 3. And in a way, I was actually half expecting in the 3rd week that these would also die, simply because the back row and these had died like roughly within a week of each other, and they haven't. Now, of course, anyone who understands electronics and reliability would know that once you get past infant mortality of your parts, there's a good chance that you're going to have a component that's going to last for quite a while, or at least until its meantime failure. So because these have actually survived what I consider the infant mortality, which is the first 2 weeks of the rest of these, there's a good chance these 3 RGBs are probably going to be okay for the rest of this PCB's life. But I don't know. However, I did think about it a bit more, and if anyone who is watching this video remembers when I built my 60% keyboard during New Year's Eve that I gave away on this particular YouTube channel when we hit one of our milestones, there were some components that hadn't been soldered on correctly on the factory. There were some diodes that didn't have good SMD contacts on it. And I thought to myself, I wonder if it was just a matter of that the heat and the use of those LEDs might have caused some of those joints to go a little bit funny. I don't know. It's a bit of a stab in the dark guess here. So what you can see is I've actually got my soldering stuff here on the table as well, and I'm going to do a very impromptu reflow on these RGB lights. So whether it actually works or not, we'll find out. So I'm just going to reset my trusty TS100. Okay. Right, now it's starting to heat up. Yeah. So I'm going to reflow them, just going to touch up these RGBs and see if it actually makes any difference at all. And if they don't, then they don't, and that's the end of that. If it does, then cool, I've managed to restore function, and we know it's just some bad solder job, or, you know, soldering iron, reflow oven, or whatever it is they use commercially to actually produce these PCBs. So my solder is hot and smoking, so I'm just going to clean that off a little bit, and just going to return it. Probably shouldn't do it over the keyboard, but oh well. They're just grab bag keycaps anyway. I'm not going to be too broken if they get a little bit of a sputter. Now, of course, I'm going to take these screws off using my Xiaomi Weeha set that I reviewed the other week as well. It's pretty cool. Super lightweight, very easy to use. Someone had questioned about the fact that it didn't have any grip on it. There was no knurling or whatnot, but it's triangular cut, so you don't need actual extra grip. And this back pivot that spins, super easy to work with. Like, no issues with it whatsoever. Okay. Probably should have taken these off before I turned on my iron, but these kind of videos are very impromptu sometimes. It's just a matter of opportunity when I can actually do something like this. My daughter, who was just over here before, you probably saw her apple in the corner of the little camera because she was like whimpering at me since she wanted to come up here. But with a soldering iron, that was not going to happen. Okay, so that acrylic plate is off. Let's just put it to the side. And yeah, there's not a lot of solder happening on these. I do have a really big fat tip here. Whether it's going to be sufficiently small enough, I don't know. But I'm just going to touch up on these anyway. I know that it's doing something because they're going shiny. You know what? That one doesn't even look like it's got very much at all. So I'm going to add a little bit of a blob there. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, in that some of those components on that 60% that I built were just, I'm not going to say they were like the highest of quality, but there was a certain sort of sloppiness about it that I'm not really surprised about. I mean, for the price that I paid, it was a $9 PCB. You know, I'm not going to be expecting the most amazing quality work or components on it, but it's a relatively easy fix if you kind of know what you're doing, which I hope I fall in that category. Like this side practically looks like there's none. Now, of course, yes, I could be destroying these, but since they don't work already, I don't feel so bad about it. Yeah. Just gonna bump my mic. There we go. Now, while I'm doing this and I'm talking down so that you can't hear me properly, I'm going to say that at the moment, at the time that I'm filming this, on a Sunday night, I normally release stuff on Mondays, so I do realize that this is going to be out of sync a little bit, but we are sitting at around 1965 subscribers or thereabouts. We're getting closer and closer to that 2,000 subscriber point where we will be doing that keycap giveaway. So if you're keen and you're interested in an idle key as well as a growler, then make sure you hang out for that. And of course, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed yet and we haven't hit 2,000 subscribers, then please subscribe, because then you'll have a chance of actually... Whoa! Okay, so that one's burnt out. Didn't even see that, but it's good that I'll show you in a second. I didn't touch that one with the soldering iron, but I can confirm it's dead, Jim. Now, whether that's caused the rest of this row to crap out or not, I don't know. If it has, then that means their design's not very good. But that pretty much at least confirms the infant mortality comment that I had earlier. But yeah, so once we hit 2,000 subs, I'll run that competition, and everyone will get a chance to be able to win some cool artisan keycaps courtesy of keycaps and one of our supporters, Jolly Green Giant, as well. Okay, so now I've just gone and touched up most of those on one side that I thought they looked like they weren't very well done, but I'm going to hold, it's going to bump my microphone again. You going to focus? Oh, come on, this thing's heavy. Wait. Alright, let's just rotate that and see if it'll focus. Focus. Right here. Right there. Oh, come on, camera. There we go. Look at that. It's completely blackened out. That corner is toast. So I don't know what happened there, but it's completely burnt out. It's gone with a puff of black magic smoke. So quality, not. Of course, that's a little bit of a sarcasm there, in case it didn't come through the internet very well. Now, I would say that these are probably sufficiently cooled down. We will discover if my little touch-up has made a difference or not in about 3, 2, 1. And it's made no difference. So those LEDs that I've touched up on very quickly didn't do squat. Yeah. So I've still got 3, which is fine. That one's packed it, so that one's 100% dead. I honestly don't know why the rest of these are no longer lighting up. Awesome sauce. Anyway, that's pretty much where I'm going to leave today's video. I hope you enjoyed me messing around with this and seeing that a $99 kit will potentially have its issues. Look, for what it is, I'm not upset because I'm not an RGB kind of person. Because I didn't even build this until now, and it's practically almost 10 months since I've had it, if I went back to Superbuy and I went, hey look, this thing's not doing what it's supposed to, they're probably just going to laugh at me, right? So there's no point even trying to ask for a return or a refund. It's just not feasible. And I would fully understand, because they'd be like, why would you sit on it for so long? And how do we know that you haven't actually done something in the 10 months and the 9 months since you've had the PCB to kill it? So that's all well and good. But if you were considering buying a 96 key from Taobao, I would suggest that as soon as these blow out, then you would probably want to deal with it straight away. And of course, you would want to build it straight away. So I didn't really show this last time when I was building it very well, but in case you get pictures and you're checking it out, the actual labeling on this is the APWS 96 key. All right, now I'm not going to put a Taobao link in the description, but if you do buy a 96 key and it's got a bent steel plate and it looks kind of like this, and they have pictures of the PCB which shows that, I would say buyer beware, because you're going to have the issues with the numpad keys not working, well, not fitting the way that they're supposed to, and potentially these RGBs are also going to crap out on you as well in a very nondescript way. Rightio, there it is. That's the video for this week. Thanks very much for coming along and checking out the video. Of course, I want to say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for being there for us and helping make our podcast happen. And of course, being able to support this channel by helping fund some of the projects and things like that that I get to play and work with. So, of course, wrapping up, you can check us out on Patreon. You can check us out on Facebook. You can hit us up on Reddit, as well as our actual podcast on Libsyn as well, or you can just use our straight up website, www.theboardpodcast.com. And these days, I hang out a lot on Slack. So if you want an invite onto our Slack group, send me an email at theboardpodcast@gmail.com and I'll be able to shoot you an invite to our Slack group as well. Right, that's it. Hope you've all had a great weekend. And, of course, as usual, of course, until next time, happy clacking.